Thank you again for joining us. My name is Paul Andrew. I'll be your moderator today. I feel like I should have one of those stick microphones to complete that. But we at PolSource wanted to get together a panel of experts to talk about something we see every day that we're helping customers try and understand every day, which is the future of service. And PolSource today helps a lot of customers from established brands trying to figure out what their service model should be, through to growth companies that are trying to differentiate themselves on a new service model. And we're seeing a few trends that are really moving quicker than they've ever moved before, oftentimes driven by the pandemic, where the service model of old doesn't work as well as it used to. And companies have to figure out what the new service model is at speed and then put it in place. So we've gathered a panel of people that are involved daily in solving the service puzzle, and we'll keep this as a conversation. And without further ado, what I'd like to do is introduce the four people today. So we've got Patrick Berries from Salesforce. Maybe you want to take a moment, Patrick, and give a little bit of background on yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Paul. My name is Patrick Berries. I'm a Vice President of Product for Salesforce's Service Cloud product. I've been at Salesforce about 11 years, and I spend a lot of time working with customers and analysts thinking about the future of service and how we need to transform to keep up with the changing needs of our organizations and our customers.
Wonderful. Thanks, Patrick. And then we have Art Scholler as well, who's from Forrester. Art, maybe you can take a moment and give a little bit of your background.
Sure. Hey, Paul, thanks. Appreciate the opportunity to participate today. So as an analyst at Forrester, I work with Forrester clients in terms of helping them look at technologies to help them win, retain, and serve customers, specifically from a contact center customer service angle. Forrester research focuses on customer experience and lately we've also added employee experience, because a great EX ends up driving a great CX. So instead of just technology speeds and feeds, it's from a strategy, plan, and implementation perspective that surround marketing, sales, and service.
Terrific. Thanks, Arden. I'm glad you brought up the employee there, something that's often been overlooked in the past that is the key driver, whether it's agents or employees in general. We also have David Emerson, who's the CIO at Appgate, and David's a customer of PolSource as well. So David, maybe you could give a little introduction.
You bet. Yeah. So we're a customer of PolSource, and I intend to bring kind of the voice of the customer to this, in the sense that service is often a myopic topic, and I've been through the implementation of numerous service products, both with PolSource and with Salesforce.com, and I think that the role of the integrator is really primarily training, not complexity, and so I intend to bring that perspective to this panel.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. And then last but not least, Dave McCall, who is the practice leader for our service practice in the Americas at PolSource. Dave, do you want to take a couple of moments?
Sure. So as Paul says, I lead our Service Cloud practice here. I grew up in the contact center. I've been in the industry for almost 20 years now, doing implementations for customers in a variety of verticals and of a variety of sizes. I spend more of my time than I ever thought I would coming out of college thinking about the contact center and how to make customer service better, and how to make that whole customer experience from end to end more seamless and easy to get through. So I'm glad to be here. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us.
Terrific. Thanks, Dave. So over the last year, I think one common thread for all of us is we've seen the pandemic challenge every view that we have about how we live our lives, how we act as customers, and the service we expect, and how our customers buy from us, and how do we deliver service? So I think one of the key threads for us to explore today is change, the speed of change. What does it mean? What's the opportunity in there as well? So what I'd like to do is kick off with the big question. What are the challenges that as a panel you're seeing in customer service organizations today, and especially as we come out of the pandemic? What have we learned? So maybe Patrick, Salesforce is leading the way here with thinking about how you can make the most of a really difficult situation. Maybe you can shine a little bit of light on that from the Salesforce point of view.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that and start the conversation. I know that all the panelists have input to give on this and the other topics as well. But I think from our perspective at a very high level, what our customers are faced with around their service operations are shifting customer needs and desires, and that may mean different channels, increased volumes. The fact that your customers are working from home as well, leads to different interaction patterns. And of course, the disruption overall to the overall life and sort of economy as well lead to all kinds of trickle-down effects in terms of changes that customers are looking for and how they interface with companies they do business with and what they need from those companies. At the same time, there's also shifting work requirements, right? There's the idea of working from home, of course, which hit a lot of contact centers right in the face very early on. But there's also disruption going on to your employees' lives. And because of some of the responses that have come up to some of these challenges, such as more bots or more digital channel usage, for example, that has also led to the outcome that agents are working on more complex issues. You have more issues to solve, or different types of issues, than you have before. And they're also more complex because those changing needs from the customer keep evolving. And also because bots and self-service, increased use of those is peeling off some of the easier work, which were trends we already saw coming, but have been accelerated dramatically, in the last 12 months. And so at a high level, that means that our customers are looking for how do they make their enterprise more agile and more connected, because those are the capabilities that they need to leverage in order to do things like automation, provide better visibility, and AI assistance to agents and to customers. And so as the kind of evolving landscape continues to move, the need for business agility has really moved up the list of requirements and priorities for the C-suite that we often talk to, and the head of contact centers who we're often engaging with. And so I think those are some of the challenges that we're all facing, both inside of service and kind of more broadly across our enterprise. And then, we will talk a little bit later, I know, about some of the solutions to those challenges. But those are some of the starting points that we see very common across our customer base and have continued to help customers solve for over the last 12 months.
Yeah, Patrick, that demand for the technology and the solutions to help drive this is a big part of the equation. And I know at Salesforce, your product teams are working harder than ever to move faster than ever. But maybe a question, I know, David, you've got a view on this about how you actually consume the technology and then turn it into change. But Art, are you seeing a lot of questions come from customers about not only what do we do, but how do we do this? How do we do this quickly? How do we, do in months what it might have taken us quarters or even years to do before?
Paul, it's exactly what I've seen in working with Forrester end user customers, since we serve both vendors and end users as well. What a difference a year makes. A year ago, literally as of right now, we just were crushed with volume from Forrester customers wanting advice. And so I characterize it as the early scramble. And we came up with the whole framework for Forrester customers for their contact center and customer service organizations. And we looked forward because we said, we can't just help them get through the initial scramble. We want to paint out a roadmap for them. So we characterized it as the early scramble, the settling down phase, and then the norming phase. Norming meaning what people are looking for in the future as they sort of get back to the office. Okay. But in that scramble, I had a whole tick list of about 12 different things that contact center leaders should look at that could be done quickly. And I'll just roll out an example. For many organizations, volumes were all over the map. Not all industries had an explosion in volume. Some of them had a big drop off in their business and therefore a drop off in volume. But banks, for example, had a big rise in volume with customers who are willing to sit on the phone for 3 hours, literally 3 hours, because they're out of work and they wanted to renegotiate their loan payments. And they wanted to talk to someone about that. So the shift in volume and the shift and unpredictability of a workforce that now is not only at home, but also dealing with the uncertainties of the work from home environment. Everybody's home. You know, I got to help the kids with their Zoom session with class. So this early scramble, I recommended to customers, for example, you usually can quickly deploy callback to peel off some of these big peaks. Now, the art and science of callback is you got to meet the promise of that callback. Just don't say you're going to call them back and then never do. So I had this whole list of early phase stuff that can be deployed quickly. And many people scramble to deploy bots, but we know that that's not so easy to deploy in a couple of days. Then that norming phase. Now that we're doing this, we're not back in the office yet. What's the normalizing of this crazy environment? And Patrick, I think you alluded to this as well, that instead of monthly leadership meetings, it's weekly. We need an agile culture, an agile decision-making structure to work with our customers on what they're experiencing and also what our agents are experiencing as well. We're largely in that normalizing phase at this point in time, but we're starting to engage customers in that. What does it mean to go back? And now that the work from home genie is out of the bottle, what do we do to adopt a hybrid model? What does that employee experience look like as we try to encourage them to come back to the office? All the safety measures, the reassurance measures, but also we still need a much more flexible workforce management element as we go forward. So it's 3 phases: the initial scramble, the normalizing phase, and then the back to work phase, and many, many different options in terms of choices of technology, also people and process changes in the midst of all of this. It's pretty much an amazing time.
Yeah, I like that that 3 stages. I think I would maybe say the last one is back to the future, right? Because it is going to be changing dramatically, and you've got to have one eye on it. David, maybe you could take a moment and walk us through what did it mean for you? How have you changed the way you operate inside the business to drive service change faster?
We were lucky. So we spun out of a larger entity, Sixtera, at the beginning of 2020, in January of 2020. And we signed our Salesforce contract in late February. And so the ramifications were apparent by the time we'd begun implementation of the quarantine and whatnot. That, as such, I think informed our implementation. It certainly informed our business practices to a degree that was fortunate for us. We didn't have a lot of adaptation to do. But I think that what a lot of businesses need to keep in mind when they have a product like Salesforce, especially under implementation and especially under duress, is that Salesforce is especially good at providing a framework through which one might survive an unusual circumstance, right? Like that kind of scrambling phase that was described is something that you can overcome with tools. But when it comes to your core business and when it comes to normalized operations, Salesforce is not going to make your business plan for you. It won't develop a great product or singular intellectual property or anything like that. And unless you're Salesforce themselves, it's probably a facilitator of your greatness rather than the greatness itself, right? Like you're not looking to be a reseller of Salesforce to your customers. You're looking to provide your service using Salesforce. And so I think that a lot of businesses, especially in times of duress, should take that step back and re-explain to themselves what it is they do. Because what it is they do is not implement Salesforce. That's PolSource's job. What it is they do is not sit around and use Salesforce and develop it. That's Salesforce's job. They implement Salesforce only so that their product can make it to customers more effectively, and so that their customers can interface with them more effectively. And that's no small thing, but it isn't the entirety of their business. And I think that that's what I would advise a lot of companies, in times of duress to do is re-strategize, re-explain to themselves why they exist and how they're going to use Salesforce, not how they're going to become Salesforce, right? Like not how they're going to insert themselves into a product and have no identity of their own.
Yeah, David, I think that's a great point. And I think one of the things that I picked up there, which we have this conversation almost daily in our business, is ultimately it's not about the technology, right? So PolSource, we chose to build solutions on Salesforce because we did and do believe it's the fastest moving way to affect change. But it's really about the experience. It's, figuring out what experience you're trying to provide. What do you think your customer needs? And then how do you continually evolve that? So that speed of change is big. And Dave, I want to hand to you, but I was remiss in one thing. There is a little button down at the bottom right for Q&A, by the way. So anybody that wants to follow up with a question, please just add it in there and we'll either cover them at the end or if I see it during the particular topics, I'll add it in. But Dave, maybe you could take 1 second to talk about what are we seeing, right? So we see a lot of different companies trying to solve this challenge of rapid change. What are the takeaways that we've learned over the last year that we can share?
Well, I think what's been really interesting, and to use Art's phrase, what a difference a year makes. What's been really interesting were companies that we talked to prior to the pandemic who were considering things like automation, bots, great agent experiences that are integrated, the things that get you efficiency in your service operation, that decided they couldn't afford it before the pandemic, came back and said, I can't afford to not do this now. And that's really the shift is efficiency has become very important. If you're going to experience a 4x increase in your call volume, you better have some ways to offload some of that. And to Art's point, not all of them have to be very tech centric. Just recording the outbound IVR message that lets people know that the different self-service options that they might have is a good start. That was what we were, that was the first thing I was recommending to people when they called and said, what do I do? I said, record an outbound message and let them know that they can self-serve on the web, or they can chat with your bot, or they can, or there's an order status page on your website. Those are, if that's what people are calling about, let's get some of those people off the call. Let them know it's going to be a little extra time waiting. So those were the things that we were seeing. But the thing that we're also seeing is that, not every business is doing real well right now. So we have all these goals to kind of maintain efficiency, keep our service levels up, but we're also getting pushed to keep costs down, as is every department in an organization. So we have to figure out some clever ways to get quick, cheap wins. And I think, the low-hanging technology is where we've all been looking. What's been interesting is here near what I will consider the end of the pandemic, knock on wood, is, we're seeing more like, okay, well, now we're going to do a bigger spend. We're not just trying to get cheap, quick wins, and low-hanging fruit. We're looking at how do we solve the big problems? And it's very gratifying as somebody who does implementations of CRM and to watch people go back to what are really essentially the fundamentals of the service business. Automate what you can automate, make your agents as effective as possible, get them to the right information quickly, get the customer the right answer, the right time as quickly as possible, and then get to the next customer.
Terrific. Thanks, David. It's a great question that came out from Getty Verma that I'm going to pass and maybe do a quick poll of the panel here. If there are 3 metrics that you think you're focused on, and the question was actually aimed at you, I think, Patrick, at Salesforce, as you focus on building an agile business and driving bottom line productivity and resiliency, if there are 3 metrics that you think are really important at the moment for anyone on this call to focus on internally, what do you think they are? And it may be that you have one, or two. So no more than three. But what do you think those new metrics are that are important to us? Patrick, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, I'll throw out the one that I think is most important for our customers, and that is and I think metric may be overstating it a bit, but the idea of customer relationship or maybe customer effort. A lot of our, especially in the contact center, we internalize these challenges that we're facing and sort of look at them from the inside out. We talk about things like efficiency, scheduling, utilization rates, average handle time. Those are all actually proxies for what's really important, which is the relationship with your customer. We need to be looking at those projects or initiatives from the outside of our organization in, not from the inside of our organization out. And so in these times of sort of turbulence, I think customers are looking for that trusted relationship. And frankly, when everything is digital, it's easier for them to hop to a competitor. And so I think that relationship with your customer is the ultimate importance in these times and will, I think, remain to some extent going forward. And so for me, that metric is about the closeness that you have with your customer, the effort that you're forcing them to go through, and the connection that you can have with them when you are talking with them, which, to facilitate that may come from empathy. It may come from connected systems so that you know more about them. It may come from providing them relevant choices that are personalized to their situation, not just generic. And those kind of things are ways that you influence it. But at the end of the day, it's how close does your customer feel you are to them?
I love that line, actually, a proxy for relationship with the customer. That's something that's so easy to forget. But when you are sitting in a room talking about average handle time, you're right. That's all that really matters. That brings us to sort of that idea of the Holy Grail, right? The relationship score, from sale to service to repeat spend and everything else. Art, what metric are you seeing your customers settle on as they try and figure out how do they measure their business or their performance in these times?
Well, I'll tell you one that is a struggle at the end of the day as we focus on winning, retaining, and serving customers. Certainly echoing Patrick here that we've got a lot of these, I call mechanical type metrics for the machine of our contact centers. But what really matters, and it is still a difficult item for a number of contact centers to get right down to that individual interaction level, some idea of if you choose customer satisfaction as the one that floats your boat, or net promoter score, or as Patrick articulated, customer effort as well. Can you get that and link that to the entire customer journey as they've managed to express their intent and move across channels and land in the contact center at some point? Are we able to really tie that customer feedback to that journey? Okay. It's an aspiration for some organizations. Some have figured it out. There's a bunch of disparate systems, but that really is the one that needs to be your guide. And for best practice organizations that we work with here at Forrester, that's where they're at. And they just take that and pump that back into the organization for people, process, and technology improvements.
Well, and I wouldn't shy away from measuring average handle time and speed of answer and all of the pieces that were first call resolution or first contact resolution, the standard things that we're measuring. But I 100% agree with Patrick. They are all really the same measure. These are all the things that we know that drive a great customer experience. What's great for all of us is that our interests and the customer's interests are generally aligned. They don't want to be on the phone for a long time either. And nor do you want your agents on the phone for a long time or handling a chat for a very long time. Everybody pretty much wants to get they want to get the right answer and they want to get it quickly. That's pretty much, we're all aligned on that. So the more we can outfit our agents to be able to give that to our customers, or not just our agents, really our entire organization, to get customers the right answer quickly, the happier they're going to be. But I agree with Art and Patrick. The primary measure is customer satisfaction, and let's not ignore and cost. We're all concerned with cost, of course, and those are often a balancing act, getting the cost and the customer service just right and hitting those, where you want those to be.
Thanks, Dave. So we're seeing in many customers of ours that they're starting to look for their opportunity in service. They're seeing, I'll give you an example. There's one brand that's sold through resellers for the longest time, and they've recognized over time that they're really disconnected from their end customer, and they wanted to change that. And then with the pandemic, nobody wanted to go into a store to buy a product. They wanted to buy it online. So they've accelerated the program to go from just being a service if one of their products had a challenge to actually engaging the customer from discovery through to service and hopefully a repeat purchase. In doing that, they've had to figure out what the service organization needs to be and what the priorities are at lightning speed. They're condensing those timeframes. What do you think the priorities for a customer service organization should be coming out of this and into the near future? So as we go to a new sort of normal, what would you say the priorities should be? What should the service organizations be thinking about? And Art, as the analyst, maybe we start with you on this one.
From a priority perspective, do you have the ability, and I'm going to be relentless on this, Paul, to really understand customer journeys at a detailed level? And so that you've got the opportunity, and what is missing, I'm always looking for, when I do assessment with contact centers, do you have a continuous improvement lead or team or function that they're never done? So many times we look at, wow, we got to deploy a bot and we've got a business case and we want to deflect X percentage of inquiries from customers. And when that's deployed, we're done, team disbands. And I say, well, no, we need to always be looking and always looking to improve. And so that continuous improvement team that has the data, can do the analytics, and can provide that closed loop feedback to people, the agents, supervisors, management of the organization, the processes. Do we have a broken process that now is causing a lot of calls to the contact center? And also the technology, the bot is bad, the website's bad. There's a hot spot in the customer journey. And so to me, that is the place of continuous improvement driven by a commitment to detailed customer journey analytics tied to, again, CSAT. Okay.
So you bring up something that's fundamental there, I think, which is this idea that you're never done. There's a journey here. Much as we might want to say, I have a budget for a project and I need to get this result. In reality, this is a very, very much an accelerating journey of change for all of us that are involved in this business. One of the things you touched on there is that feedback loop for customers. Is the journey progressing? Are our customers enjoying it? Are they staying with us, doing more with us? Also, I think you've got it for the workforce as well. So I'm going to maybe throw you a bit of a curveball here, Patrick. As we look at how do you handle agents that may not be an agent that we normally know now in a call center with 2 or 3 screens. It might be somebody that is now logging in through their iPad. How do we provide the right set of tools to constantly upskill agents? And Dave, you know where I'm going. I'm going to come back to this afterwards with you. I think a lot of our customers are starting to see, how does the technology tell us what's happening in our own employees as well, and make sure that we're driving the right things at the right time using tech. So Patrick, maybe you can share a little bit on how Salesforce is thinking of this challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think even pre-pandemic, one of the big trends that we saw and in fact have invested in is the changing nature of work and the changing nature of employees. I think that's true universally, and it's especially true in service. I think many of us can see forward, what a service worker looks like in 3-4 years is very different than what a traditional contact center worker has looked like in the past. And so we think about how do we provide the right tools and insights, to that worker and to the rest of the organization about what's going on. Now, we've seen a lot of customers accelerate their shift to the cloud, even for telephony, for example, and simplified architectures to help give them better visibility about what's going on with their customers, but also their employees. And obviously, with the idea of contact centers being dispersed and remote, the supervisor can't go walk over behind somebody's shoulder and see what they're doing and help them anymore. And I've been in lots of contact centers where that was the normal. In fact, I was in one contact center a couple of years ago where the advancement that they made for supervisor assistance was to get little razor scooters for the supervisors to more quickly get over to somebody's desk. And we're in a different world now. We're in a world where that supervisor needs to understand what's happening performance-wise, but even on a specific conversation. How does that supervisor look at and insert themselves and coach on an individual conversation when all of their agents are on their couches in their living rooms delivering service? And so we've thought a lot about that. We've delivered some new products specifically targeted at that, including our new Service Cloud Voice product, which kind of digitizes the voice channel and gives that level of visibility, which I think is very unique. But we also announced and are working on a WFM product, thinking about that from a new angle, and sort of what is the future of management of employees and work look like. And to your point and your question, a big part of that is understanding the current skill sets and then upskilling in a sort of seamless workflow way where you actually push suggested trails and suggested knowledge to an employee to then advance their levels. And then the system takes advantage of that for things like routing and future scheduling. And so there's a lot happening in that space. I think you will see a lot of movement from vendors in that space in the next 3-4 years as we move toward gig economy, toward more advanced service workers, toward people working their own shifts from home, maybe even working for multiple companies because they're subject matter experts in a certain domain. I think there will be a lot of movement in that space, and we're certainly very interested in helping fulfill those challenges.
Yeah, I think it's massively impactful if you get that right, and you can be that in process coach, guide, Sherpa, and provide the technology to support it. Dave, I know that we see this frequently, right? There's this question of how do I take telemetry out of the system to tell me what I should be doing with my employees or with my customers? Maybe you want to take a second and talk about some of the things that are happening today that that others might be thinking about.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you have kind of two pieces, and this is a really dumbed down version of it, but there's two pieces. You got to collect the right data, and then you have to do some studying of that data. And so when we're talking about telemetry, we're talking about how do I know what an agent is doing and what's successful and what's working. So, Salesforce has some of that built in, but we've actually built kind of on top of some of that to track the entire path of an agent, watch what they're doing and where they're going and how things are working. But that doesn't help you. The data, that's just data, right? That just generates the right amount of data. The bad news for all of us as we mature in our customer service processes is that to find new insights requires some study, some research. My advice to customers is find the agents that are doing it the best and then institutionalize what they're doing. So, when we're talking feature sets, we're talking about finding out how agent X is getting great customer satisfaction on the way that they're handling RMAs for your customers. And then building a flow in Salesforce that does each of those steps the same way the best agent does it so that every agent can do it that way. And then the return on investment there is the time to proficiency you get with every new agent who comes in and is now as good as the best agent at handling RMAs on their first day because you're walking them through that process. However, if you just jump in and throw out a way to do RMAs, a flow to do RMAs, but you haven't studied the best way to do it, you're just going to build a bad path that's not going to be, it's not going to flow the right way. It's not going to give the customer the best experience. So, my opinion is you have to really start studying and thinking about what are we doing that's working really well, and then institutionalize those things. The way I always say it is, pave the cow path, right? If the cow always goes this way, don't pave this path. Pave the path that they always take. It's generally going to be the best path. Agents know which way they need to go. Figure out what those ways are, and make the best path the one that they go down, the easiest one to go down.
Again, the experience is the key thing, and the tools are an enabler, Dave, right? It's all about making sure that you've got the best experience for employees to deliver the best service. David, a question for you. As you look forward, what are the technologies that you're excited about? What do you want to see from teams like Patrick's and teams like Dave here that over the next few years will allow you to go faster? If there are some things that you absolutely want to see happen with the technology, what would they be?
Yeah, well, especially as it relates to the discussion we've been having about metrics and ultimately customer experience, I think a lot of the compounding of metrics into meta metrics, things like customer relationship or even customer satisfaction, both of which are multifactorial, ignores in some situations a more technical form of service, which is what I experienced. So zooming this way further into the actual contact center, for me, we don't necessarily have a lot of inexperienced call center operators. We don't necessarily have a lot of transactional behavior. Occasionally we'll have a password reset or something like that, but for the most part, we're putting engineers on the phone because our product is highly technical and the customers calling us are highly technical. We do software support for enterprises. And as such, the pre-pandemic situation where people worked in offices and close proximity to one another, it has kind of mitigated a number of sins, which include poor communication, poor remote communication, especially the poor transactional, the sharing of information between this call, which is having a problem with the IP space, and this call, which is having a problem with DNS, and the two actually are related to a feature that was released last week, but the engineers are just starting to get calls about it now. That kind of information sharing, I'm excited to see people effect in a remote paradigm. And I think that that's something that we can no longer rest on the possibility that we all exist in the same room or that we all exist in the same building. And if we do, it's at our peril, because the meta metrics one day, the compound metrics like relationship and time to satisfactory resolution will suffer for reasons that have nothing to do with any single agent and their call with any single customer. They have to do with the network of information that you managed to build amongst your representatives. So I'm interested to see how Salesforce and others solve those problems. Some of those problems have to be solved internally and organizationally, but nonetheless, I think that that's probably one of the most exciting things that could come out of all of this. In general, I think that another maturation and adoption that I'm excited about is the admission that we've lost the perimeter. This can be the perimeter of the enterprise. You see a lot of zero trust and software defined in the marketing. I think that that's little more than marketing, but fundamentally, we have lost the perimeter within the context of customer service and success. We can no longer tightly associate our customers with the companies they may work for. We can't set rigid and also brittle standards for things like authentication and identity and configuration. These things are all breaking down with BYOD and work from anywhere, and possibly even work for multiple companies on both sides of the customer service transaction. And so I see the future the future moving toward an identity that is more based on behavior and biometrics and multiple concurrent factors to prove identity, rather than on this sort of rigid notion of what customer number are you, or what agent number are you, and who do you work for on both sides of that equation.
Art, what are you most excited to be as you look at the waves that are coming out? Where are you starting to look, and what are you hoping that firms like Salesforce and others will start to provide?
Paul, I want to do a little bit of keying off of your use of Back to the Future. I don't know if we've trademarked the name and but they'll catch up to us for
I
using
struggle
it.
with
But
that one.
yeah, so 3 years ago, I wrote a paper entitled The Cognitive Contact Center. And, you know, it was at that time that everyone was excited about AI and chatbots, voice bots, and we'd kill our contact centers and we'd all be talking to automation. And I said, no, I think the story's bigger than self-service. And so I looked at all the places that we would start to see AI go into our contact center operations. And I'm going to touch upon a few of these that really excite me. There's no question that on the front end, either voice or text, some are bad, some are good, some are really good in terms of the bots that are doing self-service. Great, that's going to continue, and those are going to continue to get better. But let's look at a number of other roles, a number of other places. As we look at, and as David identified, that identity is going to get more organic. But what do we do to take a customer with a particular intent and match them with an agent? We are going to kill skills. Okay, I'm absolutely convinced of that, that more of an attribute-based matching of agents with customers driven by AI. You know, we're just starting to look at that a little bit more. There's been a journey for years by a number of other vendors to do that. But I think there is an incredible environment going forward to take a lot more attributes about the customer, what they want, and who the agent is. And I'm not saying that a 30-year-old agent matched to a 30-year-old customer. No, it's a much richer set of attribute matching. Let's look at the roles in terms of the people managing the contact center, our workforce managers and our quality assurance folks. AI enabling and augmenting their jobs. There's one vendor that I spoke to just the other day that is building AI models that are not just looking at the real-time sentiment and emotion. I hate to fluff that off, but that's pretty common right now. But let's look at the history of the training of this agent. What's their training path that they are on? And as a QA person, who should I be coaching today? Based on a much richer set of attributes. This vendor is building models for very large contact centers and really helping target the QA teams and training teams to what agent and what they're going to do to work with them today, and so on. So that's the QA. And then workforce management, this crazy forecasting and scheduling thing. Can we really develop a better way to reach out to agents when we anticipate, not react to, but anticipate spikes in volume and reach out to agents who've said, hey, if you need me today, you know, I'll log in, okay? Getting to that intraday crisis before it happens so that you're not digging yourself out of a queue that's in trouble that takes hours to do. So these are just some examples of how we personalize for the customer, personalize for the agent, personalize for the QA team, personalize for workforce managers, leveraging bots working at our sides, okay? Not necessarily replacing us, but all these amazing places where AI is starting to feed into the contact center.
Yeah, I like that description of AI a lot, Art. I think there's an assumption that the bot takes away something and takes care of it for you. Whereas in reality, it should be a companion for the guide. It allows you to quickly tick off 3 or 4 attributes with a customer in a seamless manner and guide them to that engineer, David, at your firm that really understands the issue and that can solve it instantly and can learn a lesson and harvest that back, or send it to somebody who's new to the team but's well prepped to answer any questions on the product at a high level, and then allow them to automatically get a red flag saying, hey, you know, you're about to get out of your depth here. You should pass this to a tier 2. That journey, massaged or guided by AI, is sort of the panacea solution for me, as opposed to, you know, the bot taking care of all of the customer interaction.
And Paul, I want to interrupt you here. You know, I have a short, sweet, and to the point phrase that I use, that we do have these amazing expectations, but it does take work. It takes innovation. You know, bots, you know, I often say good data, good bot, bad data, bad bot. Okay. When we feed to these algorithms outcomes that are off kilter, they'll learn, but they'll learn poorly and bad and so on. So it takes also a firm like yourselves, Paul, to work on a platform like Salesforce, to provide the consultative expertise, to really help these systems evolve in the right way. And if they don't, we can also get ourselves in trouble. So to kind of catch that as that's happening. All right. Is that fair enough, Paul? Good data,
Absolutely.
good bot, bad data, bad bot.
We have those, and I'm going to ask the last question here at the minute. I'll start with Dave, so I'll let you pick up from this. But we have this conversation all the time. Well, surely the bot should be really fast to put in, and it should have an immediate impact. And the reality is they're very fast to put in, and they can have an immediate impact if you give them a simple task. If you want them to actually do their best work for you, you train them, you teach them. And you teach others how to use them as well. And Dave's smiling because he has these conversations all the time with you get out what you put into it. The use of bots is incredibly powerful if you apply it correctly. So Dave, my question I'm going to start with you on is what are the predictions that we titled this The Future of Service? We've talked about the fact that we've got massive change that's changing how quickly we need to adapt. We've talked about, the 3 stages: scramble, normalize, and then try and get back to thinking about the future. What do you think service looks like in 5 years? If you're just getting into the industry today and you're starting to lead your company's journey on service, what should you be thinking about building towards over the next 5 years?
I mean, I think we were hitting on it even in that last question. And it's funny because I think we all imagined, or we all read the articles that said the future of service is all going to be automated and it's all going to be disconnected and dehumanized. And you're hearing everybody here, and my prediction is the same. The future of service is going to be more human. That doesn't mean more human hours are going to go into providing that service. But I think we're going to treat the customer like we're going to know the customer better. It's going to be a broader understanding, and your brand is going to be more human in interacting with them. So you're not going to be interacting with a person just to provide them service. And then someone over here is going to provide them some marketing. And then someone over here is going to sell to them. And I know this is somewhat what we've been talking about for a long time, but when it all comes together, the future will be your brand will know this person and this person will know your brand. And I don't see us doing case management 10 years from now. I see us having long, prolonged conversations with customers, the same way you have conversations with your friends in text messages that never end. I never tell my friends, okay, goodbye, this conversation is over in a text. We just stop talking, and then tomorrow we pick up that text conversation where we left off. And so for a brand, that will be the conversation you're having with them on social, the conversation you're having with them via text, the conversation you're having with them over the phone, via email, via the web. All of that's one conversation. It will become broader and more prolonged, where you're just helping the customer and interacting with the customer, sometimes automated, sometimes not, but it always feels the same. They feel like you know them and who they are. So the technologies under the hood are the same technologies we're talking about now. We've got to get our customer 360 right. We have to really know who that person is and make sure that it's true across all the channels. We need our automations to be empathetic, well-trained, understand what they're doing, provide the services that people are looking for. We need AI to augment what we know about the customer to whoever's serving that customer at that point in time, whether that is on the service channel or the marketing channel or in sales. We know what's going on with this customer because AI is filling in some of the gaps for us, and the customer 360 is telling us what's happening everywhere across the board. So that's kind of what I see happening, besides a lot of the things that we're already dabbling in, things like proximity and IoT and kind of knowing who they are, where they are, seeing things pop up, getting proactive about what we're seeing. Some of those things are true, but that's all just more information to know about that particular customer that you can use to serve them.
Yeah, I agree, Dave. I think that those things that we've sometimes looked at as the answers are actually just feeds, proximity, just allow. I like the idea of that text message that you don't want to leave, with a group of friends where the last thing you'd do is delete that text message thread and get rid of it. If you can get that relationship with a customer where they're not sure who's going to answer that question, but they know that it's that answer's coming from someone that's living in that thread and is aware of what's happening is crucial. I'd like to maybe finish with you, Patrick and Art, on this, as you two probably think more about 5 years out than any of us here. So, David, what do you think service looks like in the next 5 years?
I think what Dave was alluding to, I actually believe, is the hallmark of the maturation of any technology. I think right now we're in a very awkward phase. I think interaction with many bots, if they are to be a guide, it's Virgil of the schizotypals. I mean, it's many of these guides are not, in fact, guiding us anywhere. But if they are, where the bots do work, they're working in a very awkward, wooden way, right? Like we have this sort of direct attempt to replace what was the IVR / lowest level of customer engagement at, in the call center skills tier. I think that what we will see is, as with any good technology, it will become seamless over time. We sequester our best efforts and our maturity in any technology. If you think of anything that's ancient that we use today, it's not impressive many times, not because it isn't refined, but because it's so refined that we've forgotten the ways in which it's impressive. And that's the way I see call center technology, especially the integration of AI and the integration of some of these ML routines becoming, just like search has become by Google. Like Google's efforts made search something that was no longer wooden. It's very organic. You just type in your query in natural language or not in natural language. It doesn't really matter. And you skip all that part of discovery right to the link that is most relevant. And I expect service to be the same. I expect in the future, you probably won't know whether it's a bot or whether it's just a really good search algorithm or maybe a human, but we may not even need to pretend that the bot is a human or a human adjacent. It just becomes a pathway to the engineer that you need. It might simply be a matching algorithm like Art was referring to. So I see that as the aspiration. And I think we should work to make the customer no longer aware of the machinations that result in them being guided to the appropriate place.
That takes us down a whole other path of AI, maybe another webinar about that.
Yeah.
Patrick, what Salesforce is renowned for thinking, 5 years plus into the future, and then trying to work backwards with how do you put the building blocks in place as much as you can. I feel like I should flash up a safe harbor here. What do you think customer service?
I have the tattoo. I can show you on my upper arm.
I'm sure you have one with you. What do you think service looks like at 5 years? Forget the technology that puts it together.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I think is what do we think the end state looks like, or it's not an end state, but the state at that moment looks like, and then reverse engineer the technology as opposed to the other way around. In other words, I wouldn't jump to the conclusion that the future of service is AI. I would think about what is the relationship to your customer. And in fact, to be provocative, I might even say in 5 years, service will be dead, but also long-lived service in meaning that I think the way that we will deliver engagements with our customers is focused more on the customer relationship and less on solving a specific incident. I think some of the classical things around, let's say, incident management or case management or entitlements and milestones do not become the focus of our relationships. And the technologies like AI do not become the focus of our relationships. But instead, those workers who are on the front lines are focused on building and maintaining relationships with the customers and are driven by customer success as opposed to incident resolvement. And I think to facilitate that, it does take a different kind of technology, a different type of mindset. But I think the kind of people who will be delivering service and the kind of people who will be, receiving that, I think that relationship looks different. And I think it is much more relationship-based, goal-oriented, long-term focused, and much less on, getting off the phone in 2 minutes or, getting the fastest resolution for this one question. It's more about understanding the context. What is this customer trying to really achieve? To do that, you need more data. You need to understand their journey. You need to understand other customers' journeys, what's been successful before. But I think at the end of the day, the contact center as we know it is not long for this world. I think we will have groups of people whose goal is customer success, and who will rally around customers through capabilities like swarming, but also just in terms of intent. My intent is not to solve this customer's one question that they asked. My intent is to move this customer forward on their journey toward their goal. And I think that's what service looks like as we look 4 or 5 years in the future.
I love that idea of service is dead, long live service. And I do think you're right. The traditional roles, nobody will be involved in just customer service at a company. I think everyone will have a responsibility for customer service, and it will vary depending on what they can do for a customer journey. I think that's a great explanation. Art, maybe you can bring us home with what is Forrester and what does Art think the future of services in 5 years?
One of the compelling things that we find as we survey and we develop we have our customer experience index, which we've now applied to both B2C and B2B scenarios. And yes, there's many underlying drivers for that overall index of satisfaction. But boy, what comes out in spades all the time is emotion. And we've used the word relationship here and the just not managing a case. But whether it's self-service or once that kind of runs out of gas and we end up interacting with an employee within the firm, how do I leave that interaction and how do I believe my relationship with that brand feeds my emotion? I mean, we've talked about AI. AI is a tool to enable an organization to provide for a great customer journey. That any spot where there's a hot spot, we know about it, we go stomp that fire out, and we create a emotionally great experience at that hot spot instead of that hot spot persisting. I really do believe, and I got into this business by accident. I know other folks did as well, but at the end of the day, the individuals who work with customers, and Patrick's used the term customer success, we need to enable them to feed that emotion. And from the time that they're onboarded into the organization, as their careers developed and they move through, how are they servicing that helping gene within themselves? Because I always find that, contact center agents, supervisors, leaders, they got here because they've got that helping gene, okay? Even if it's a sale, I'm selling you something that's going to help you. So I know this is very qualitative and very what's this emotion thing that Art's talking about? But it is truly an attribute and a component that organizations, if they really pivot around that and then let everything follow, that's really the guide to the future of service.
Oh, I love it, Art. I think I'm going to go try and trademark a emotional relationship score. I think that is a way to look at it. And it transcends customers and the employees as well.
Yep.
We're at the top of the hour. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you, Art, David, Patrick, and Dave, for spending an hour of your time. I know that's the most valuable thing that we have at the moment. We'd like to drive this as a series and at least once a quarter, start to drill down into how we drive this future together. So I'll look forward to talking with some of you on a future panel. And for anybody that has follow-up questions, there's a hello at PolSource there if you'd like to send those. There's one question that popped up that is a topic all of itself. How do we deal with channels? How do you allow channels to have that same experience? So I'll say thank you, pull this to a close, and thank you for spending an hour with us, everybody.
Thank you.